Let us stand for a moment of quiet reflection or prayer as you wish. As we are about to take counsel together on matters concerning this county, we should seek to faithfully discharge our duties of office, both in our debate and in our decisions, and promote the health, safety and well-being of those we serve. Thank you. Please be seated. Fellow councillors, officers and members of the public, including those listening in via the Zoom webcast, welcome to our council meeting this evening, and may I be the last to wish you a very happy new year. We are not expecting a fire drill this evening, therefore in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the chamber by the nearest exit and assemble at the rear of the council car park. Before we get to the agenda proper, I'd also like to remind members to stand and ensure your microphone is switched on when speaking. When voting, please ensure your hand is fully raised and wait until voting is confirmed before lowering it. I'd also like to be clear on the purpose of this meeting. This is a special meeting of the council called by 6 members to debate flooding. As with all council meetings, this is open to the public. However, it is not a meeting for the public. We have a number of people registered to speak on agenda item 5, and in accordance with our procedure rules, only those registered will be able to address the council. Any disruption of the meeting or attempts to interrupt those speaking will not be tolerated. So now on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies. Mr. Delaney.
Chairman, we received apologies from Councillors Ellison, Ross and Powell, therefore Council has voted to 24.
Very much. Item 2 is Chairman's announcements, and I will make a full set of announcements at our next scheduled meeting. Item 3 is announcements from the leader, members of the Cabinet or the head of paid service, and I'm likewise advised that these will be made at the next meeting. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Nope. Okay. Item 5, petitions, deputations and questions from members of the public. So we have 21 deputations and questions this evening. Oh, Councillor Stephenson.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I don't know if this is exactly the right point, but I would like to propose that we suspend procedure rule 26 to enable all members of the public who have asked to speak or to ask questions that they are able to do so without being curtailed by the 30-minute time slot.
So do we have a seconder? Councillor Payne. So we've got a proposer and a seconder. All those members in favour of suspending?
I believe that's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay. So that procedure rule 26 is now suspended, so the time limit of 30 minutes for this item is now doesn't exist anymore. So we will proceed through the list of deputations and questions in the order which they were received, and if anyone is not present, then we will promptly proceed on to the next item on the list. Each deputation, the person presenting will have 5 minutes to address the council, following which elected members may ask any questions they have for a further 5 minutes. For each question, the person presenting will ask their question, a member of the Cabinet will respond, and the questioner may ask a supplementary, which must relate to the original question or the answer. The total time for questions is 5 minutes per question. Mr. Delaney here on my right will indicate to the speakers when there is 1 minute left by holding this sign up right there. So the first deputation is from Mr. Gordon Brown. So, Mr. Brown, if you'd like to come to the microphone, please. And your 5 minutes will start from when
you wish me to stand, Chairman?
You can stand or sit as you wish. So your 5 minutes will begin when you speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillors, for hearing this evening. I'm here on behalf of Barrington Parish Council, and I'd like to raise 3 issues. And those three issues are failure to deal with flooding premises under the Flood and Water Management Act, failure to have surface water assets properly identified, and the requirement to have an up-to-date surface water management plan. The first issue. During Storm Babet, 7 premises were flooded in Barradon, and during Storm Henk, 2 premises were flooded, which were 2 for a second time. In our view, Rutland County Council failed to respond adequately at the time or during the 3 months following the first incident. Fix My Street reports were raised and advised as complete, in our view, without adequate investigation. Based on the available evidence, the flooding was caused by surface water pipework being blocked and or damaged. When reported for a second time after Storm Henk to the highways manager and Fix My Street, a cursory visual inspection of drains was carried out, and we were advised that it was not a problem and the case was closed, despite photographic evidence supplied showing the contrary. We would therefore ask that a proper physical examination of identified pipework be conducted as soon as possible. And our reasoning for this is that the particular pipework involved caused the 2 additional premises to be flooded for a second time. It's a very clear reasoning behind that request. Also, a formal request was made to the leader and portfolio holder because these flooding incidents fall under the jurisdiction of Section 19 of the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. A response was received, but no action taken and no report produced, as required by that particular piece of legislation. We'd ask that proactive measures be implemented to mitigate the consequences of such events in the future. And we would suggest a policy be developed similar to that in Blackpool. And I've provided a link to members for that, and you can have a look at it. On issue 2, after Storm Babet, the Parish Council resolved to carry out an audit of the surface water drains, the chambers that is, in the village. It made a request via our councillor to Rutland County Council for details of those assets. After 6 weeks with no response, we asked our councillor to follow this up, and she was told that Rutland County Council does not hold those records. This is contrary to the statutory requirements, meaning that Rutland County Council is breaching its legal obligations under Section 21 of the Floods and Water Management Act 2010. We'd ask the Council to include this as a specific topic for scrutiny, to ask officers to bring forward a programme to collate the data for inclusion in the Highways GIS system. There's also a question of whether those assets and liabilities are actually being recognised in the Council's accounts. If you don't, you've got them, how do you know what the asset is, what value that asset is, and what's liability? Issue 3. Under the Floods and Water Management Act, unitary authorities are responsible for a leadership role in local flood risk management, which I know they're engaged in. But the surface water management plan forms a key part of that. The Council's draft strategic flood risk assessment, currently on the website at paragraph 630, states that Rutland County Council has not published a surface water study that covers the county. Given the impact of flooding over the last few months, Barradon Parish Council would argue that this study should be carried out as a matter of urgency for the protection of existing residents and, for that matter, the soundness of the local plan. How can one have houses built when you don't know where the surface water is going to enter? In summary, we seek that the Council request a physical examination of identified pipework in Barradon and the appropriate remedial work as required. Surface water drainage assets across the county be identified and recorded, along with a condition onto the GIS network. And third, as a matter of urgency, scrutiny to consider that RCC carry out the obligatory surface management study, surface water management study, and develop a plan for Rutland within an agreed timescale. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. We now have 5 minutes for questions from members. Councillor Clifton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, Dawn, thank you very much for your deputation. I'm sure we're all very grateful. Just wondered, could I please ask you, in your own time and words, I'd like to ask you, if I may, first of all, what was the impact of flooding on the residents of Barradon? And secondly, if I could, what action has Barradon Parish Council taken after the floods? Thank you very much.
Thank you. The impact has been significant on those houses that were flooded. quite clearly. Those residents are now very concerned about future floods, as we saw them during Storm Henk. We had 7 premises affected to a greater or lesser extent. 2 were significantly flooded, one up to 18 inches deep. The other had water all throughout the house at ground level and coming through rapidly. So that's the sort of impact it's had. So they've had severe damage to their furniture, carpets, etc. As far as Barrington Parish Council, what action we've taken, one of the areas that caused flooding was it came off the hillside, off the A47, down the hillside, through a valley, into houses which were built, and we questioned whether they should have been built there given the history. And the problem is you've been back 40 years maybe since the last time water ran down this way. And we've actually dug a ditch across that field and created some hopefully drainage into the rock bed, which is only about a metre below the ground down surface. So we've paid for that along with support from the residents. They contributed to that work. It's temporary work. We'll probably have to do more. We'll have to demonstrate that it will work. And but these are the sort of discussions we would have expected to have had with the County Council as the lead flood authority. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. Members, any more questions for Mr. Brown? Councillor Wilby and Councillor Lambert.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Brown, Gordon, if I may. You were a very conscientious and rigorous member of the Cabinet for several years. Can I ask whether, in your time on Cabinet, the question of surface water management came up?
That's a little bit, yeah, it did actually. In a very early period on Cabinet, I think it must have been about 2018, I had a conversation with Peter Brown, who at that time, some of the more mature members of Council were called, was the Director of Highways. It was about the surface water strategy at that time, the strategy at that time. I asked him about surface water problems, and he indicated that Rutland doesn't really have a problem with surface water, except for Langham, which we all know about, Whistendale, which we all know about, and Schofield Road in Oakland, which we have problems with. Schofield Road I know was dealt with. I know that Langham has been worked on. I know that Whistendale has had some work, although I'm sure the residents from Whistendale may have different views on that. But the rest of the flooding, it was suggested, could be dealt with on an ad hoc basis because it didn't really cause a problem. And probably, 8 years ago, that was probably true. I think we've seen over the last, certainly the last 12 months, a difference in climate, difference in the rise in temperature. I think if you saw the weather forecast, not weather forecast, the forecast was saying the temperature during the second half of last year, shut up now and let somebody else have a question, has caused problems. And therefore I think we have to take a different viewpoint now from the one we had maybe 8, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Councillor Lambert.
Thank you. I think my question is more or less just an answer. I was going to ask whether this is a sort of newly emerging challenge for Barrington, whether it's something that's been going on for many years. Thank you.
Very good question. I think Barrington can say, and this I got this from one of our residents who's been a resident for his whole life. The last time that we had a flood like this, it was over 40 years ago. So it's not, it was one of these 100-year type things. We've had 2 now in 4 months. And I think that's the risk that we run as a country. We've got to change our attitude towards surface water plumbing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I think the time has now elapsed. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
The next question is from Alderman Edward Baines.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Edward Baines, resident of Broadston. I haven't, I'm sorry, a copy of my exact wording, but the gist of the question is the same. what actions did Rutland County Council take on January the 2nd, and was that shared with the Environment Agency?
Alderman Baines, that isn't exactly the question. Can I read it out for you for clarity? Could someone tell me what happened on January the 2nd in relation to the floods, and what action did the council take? Councillor Wise.
I'm horrified to find I might have to try and fit this in 5 minutes, so I will talk quickly. The summary is there was a lot of rain. It followed a lot of rain in October and December, so that isn't such a flippant statement. It's unprecedented levels of rain in October and December. The fields were already soaked. And as Brown has already said, this is not something we're used to. The ground was saturated, groundwater levels were already high. The council reacted to keep people informed, keep people safe, and coordinated the services as appropriate. And I think it's worth noting that the workers were on duty throughout the night. When most of us were tucked up asleep, they were out sorting out signs. They did what was possible to hasten reduction of the residual water once the water had stopped rising. It's important to remember that we cannot ask, nor should we expect workers to go into rising flood water. It's important to note that on the 2nd of January we had received no flood alert in advance from the Environment Agency. No, Meteorological Service, I'm getting the wrong service. Calls were received around 2:30 on Tuesday the 2nd in community safety, adult social care and communications due to rising floodwaters. An immediate response was mobilised. At 3:30 p.m, local incident response meeting held, attended by the emergency rota leads, highways, lead local flood authority, resilience forum, officer, adult social care and communications. A number of actions were agreed, the primary focus of the response to identify and support vulnerable residents, which I think we'd all agree was the most important. Individuals and care homes providers have been contacted and given advice. It was confirmed that we were adhering to the council's sandbag policy, which is only to provide sandbags in exceptional circumstances, and we only have a limited supply. We agreed a comms strategy, public messaging and sign-off of protocol for the imminent issue, and ongoing monitoring of social media. Follow-up meeting held at 5:30, confirmed actions had been completed and plans for overnight and out of hours working. Satisfied that the vulnerable residents at Barleythorpe had been supported, some had opted to stay in their homes, but were provided with out of hours support. Ongoing contact with fire service. At 7 p.m, or by 7 p.m, 22 flooding incidents had been reported, all from localised surface water flooding. 4 roads were closed and flood boards requested for a further 7 sites. Many of the areas impacted were those that had also been affected by Storm Babet. The most significant flooding incident had been at Ostlers Drive, Barleythorpe. This resulted in a number of properties being flooded and residents having to relocate. It's important to note that Ostlers Drive is an unadopted road, and Allison Homes, as management company, were on site supporting residents along with Council's community safety team. And we have in fact today received a compliment for the community safety team and the support that that person had received. Ongoing review of the forecast, probably doing a little dance wishing it would stop raining. The Ashwell depot was flooded. The transport team had to be mobilised to move equipment from the Ashwell depot and relocate to OEP. There were issues with getting a small number of children home from school due to road closures and flood water, but all the children were home by 7 p.m. Highways responses.
Councillor Wise, that is 5 minutes, so I'm afraid that is the end of your answer.
If you wish to know the remainder, I can supply it in writing.
Okay, thank you, Alderman Baines.
May I
No,
just-
that's the end of that,
That's
that
right,
question,
thank you.
I'm afraid. So we're now going on to number 3, which is a deputation from Cynthia Moss from Whistendine Parish Council. So with the deputation, again, it's 5 minutes for the deputation and then 5 minutes for questions. So when you're ready, Ms. Moss.
Yes, thank you. Whistendine has experienced 9 road closures in the centre due to flooding since Storm Babet on the 20th of October this year. One house and business floods regularly, but most others have so far managed to avoid serious flooding due to their own flood defences and pumps. At its peak, a 33-foot wide river rushes through the bottom banks and out into Cow Lane, inundated the Nook, the village green, both sides of the bridge at the White Lion. Estimates put the depth at over 30 inches in places. Our water comes via 2 streams emanating near Cold Overton and at Holbeck Farm, dropping steeply, one at 12.5 metres and the other at 15.5 metres per kilometre to the village centre where they meet at the bridge. There is minimal fall beyond this point, only 5.77 metres per kilometre to the floodplain to the north below Whistendine Station and into Stapleton Park. 2 more streams from Somerby, Cold Overton, skirt the village, to the east via Langham and Ashwell, to the west via Leesthorpe, flooding as they go, to join the Whistendine water in the same floodplain, along with water draining from Wynandham. There are also many underground streams in the area, one of which surfaces near Whistendine Lodge, flowing northeast, crossing the Melton and Stapleford Road into the very same floodplain. This floodplain drains slowly, as the rivers Eye and Reek, into which it drains, are controlled by the Melton Mowbray flood defences. Our water then eventually goes to the flood areas of the River Soar on into the River Trent. Thoughts on how RCC might help? Strategic planning of water disposal, reducing surface water runoff to streams and already overloaded combined sewer systems, and encouraging neighbouring authorities to do the same. Investigate the possibility of leaky dams and encourage or incentivise farmers and landowners to set aside marginal land upstream for floodwater retention, including in Leicestershire. Each July and August, walk strategically important water courses like Whistendine, Langham and unnamed brooks, assessing persistent blockages on streams in order to require riparian owners to keep streams from flowing. This is particularly important downstream of the road bridge at the White Lion. Better training for planning staff and councillors around flooding to avoid poor planning decisions. I'll give you 2 examples. RCC granted planning for a dwelling in Whistendine bordering the stream against recommendations of WPC and the Environment Agency, who pointed out that it was on a floodplain. Then, when the owner constrained the stream with gabions, RCC granted retrospective planning permission, despite warnings of downstream impact. A near neighbour raised the soil levels on his side of the stream in response. RCC investigated but did not enforce removal of the soil tank. The combined effect threatens a dwelling downstream, and the force of the water exiting this constrained reach has demolished the bridge parapet over the culvert on the Nook during Storm Henk. A second example, you'll recognise it. The Ridge and Furrow High Pasture to the western side of the village was identified as a significant water holding site. Planning permission was recently granted for 66 dwellings. Between the grant of outline planning and the full planning on December the 23rd, the developers bulldozed the site flat. During Storm Henk, the water cascaded eastwards from the site through gardens and Sherard's Close onto Stapleford Road, where it entered a business premises, the first time this has happened, and also threatened a house. Then it followed the slope down into Main Street and on towards the Green, inundating a business and associated accommodation and threatening other houses. Please take us seriously when we try to highlight flooding issues in planning applications. We are trying to help planners, not undermine them, but we are the ones who live here and have studied the area. And please, consult contour maps to check all the slopes and level changes as part of planning decisions. Since the village sits in the basin, only slightly above the floodplain, any building on the highland encircling the village or involving more water entering the drains and streams will most definitely result in increased flooding. Finally, use the Anglian Northern Regional Flood and Coastal Committee more effectively. RCC has 2 seats on this group, but the minutes do not seem to reflect effort expended in meaningful problem solving that would benefit Rutland settlements. Thank you.
Ms Moss, questions from members? Councillor McGraw.
Thank you. As a newish member of the planning committee, Miss Moss, if I may.
Yes, that's fine.
I do recognise the second example you gave in Rutland line, the 66 house site. I don't recognise the first planning permission that you mentioned, the single dwelling.
Yes,
Can I ask you when that was?
do you know, oh gosh, it must have been 4 years ago, maybe 5. It's off the Nook, and it's on one of the streams, the very fast flowing one that comes into the village, and it was an infill site.
Okay.
So it was an infill, and then once the people moved into the house, they realised that their garden was flooding and it was getting closer to the house, and so that's when they put the gate into.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any more questions from members? Okay, thank you, Ms Moss. Number 4 is a question from Eleanor and John Martindale.
Thank you. I would like to ask, how can we get action taken by highways with blocked drains causing flooding and damage to our property when it rains? We have tried for nearly 18 months, even before the recent storms have made it worse, to get this problem solved through the usual channels. We've tried Fix My Street.
That isn't what you've got down as your question,
Well, I
right?
can't.
So you can't expand on your question.
Right?
Councillor Wise.
Thank you. This actually was raised with me by your ward councillors, and it was already a matter on the radar of the director places. And she has told me that it's a specific area of ongoing investigation. An investigation in November was inconclusive, so further investigation is planned. It's not possible to conclude at this time that drains are causing flooding of the property, which is the reason for the further investigation. And I can assure you that the resource for that investigation has been found.
Can I just say that...
So, Ms Boswell, you're allowed to have a supplementary question if you like. So if you've got another question for Councillor Wise which follows on, then you can ask it now.
I don't know if it's a question, probably not. It's the second time it happened, and it was a blocked drain. It happened in 2021, and it was a blocked drain.
So is there a question
It
here?
isn't a question,
Okay.
just how long is it going to take to get returned?
Right, that's a question.
And at this stage, I can't tell you, we have found the resource to be able to now cease the person to do the investigation, or the company, whatever, to do the investigation.
Okay, thank you, Ms Martindale.
Sorry, oh sorry.
May I ask a question?
No, I'm afraid not. Number 5 is Councillor Stephenson on behalf of Chris Fisher.
Thank you very much. So speaking as Chris Fisher, I'm interested to know what measures are in place to tackle flooding in counties across the UK. Local authorities seem powerless to put measures in place to prevent flooding or even investigate the initial causes of flooding.
Councillor Wise.
I have actually got a link which doesn't work very well through the ether here, where you can look up the flood risk management of other local government associations. Perhaps we could supply that through the minutes, would be good. That is a good outline of how local authorities in the UK manage and mitigate impact of flooding in their report, which is called Flood Risk and How It Can Be Managed by Local Authorities to Help Mitigate the Impact of Flooding, which I think answers that question perfectly.
So, thank you, councillor Stephenson. Obviously, you can't have supplementary because you're not asking the question yourself. Number 6 is another question, Susan and David Fairclough. That's under Mr. and Mrs. Fairclough, who appear to be here. So we'll move on to number 7, Wynne and Michelle Edwards. This again is a question.
Hello. Right. I understand in 2021, riparian owners in Wissendine were contacted by RCC to undertake work on their portion of the back of the brook. Can you confirm who in the council is responsible for inspecting the brook and other watercourses in Rutland to ascertain what work riparian owners are required to carry out, and that in this case all of the work was in fact carried out?
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor Wise.
I'm afraid that question dates from before my time, so I have a written response for you. In 2021, Rutland County Council and Wissendine Parish Council agreed to a policy of aiming to reduce the flow of water in order to mitigate flood risk in this location. Therefore, no further requests were made to freeholders to undertake works to widen the watercourse banks. Trent Rivers Trust has since started a flood mitigation initiative with local freeholders in Wissendine. How to deal with the watercourse in riparian ownership will be addressed as part of the Section 19 investigation, which I'd like to just mention at the end of this response. This is likely to take in the region of 12 months to complete. The Section 19 investigation, we have that Storm Henk took us over the threshold for a Section 19 investigation, which Storm Babet didn't. So there will be a full investigation into various flooding incidents and what's being done to mitigate them at the moment.
Would you like a supplementary?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't believe that the parish council can actually answer for riparian owners, and I actually know that riparian owners were written to, and the work hasn't been carried out. And therefore, I don't understand what the point is writing to riparian owners if you don't then enforce it. So you've said it has been done, that the parish council agrees. I don't think they can agree.
So is this a question?
So can the parish council answer on behalf of all riparian owners that have been written to carry work out?
Well, we can't answer on behalf of parish councils.
Legally, can the parish council tell RCC, don't worry about it, we are going to look at it?
I can't answer that immediately.
Could somebody give me that answer in writing then, please?
Councillor Wise.
I think the way I've read it was that it was agreed that they wouldn't carry out the work.
That they own a small part of, they're a riparian owner for a small part of the brook. Lots of other riparian owners were written to, so...
This is, you can't ask another question. Let Councillor Wise answer, please.
Can I suggest that it's prior to my time, there's clearly some history to this. Can we supply you with a written response to that?
You can, and I'd also like to know when the next inspection of the brook is going to take place, because it's clearly urgent.
So you're asking another question, though? You're going to have one supplementary.
Can you tell me when the next inspection of the Wissendine brook is going to take place? And
There will be
put that
written
in the
answers to
answer.
your questions as part of the minutes of this meeting. I think we've now out of time for that question. Item 8 on the questions is by Jennifer Hughes-Nurse, and I think Councillor Payne is going to ask this question.
On behalf of Jennifer Hughes-Nurse, Rutland Council must now realise that the effects of the recent heavy rains have been made very much worse by the poor and often infrequent maintenance of dikes, grass verges, grips, drains and poor flood assessment information is given. What plans does Rutland Council have to put in place now to ensure that such a catastrophe never happens again due to such negligence?
Councillor Wise. Councillor Wise.
Coming to Councillor Wise shown here. The question assumes that the floods were down to poor maintenance and poor flood assessment. However, the circumstances of the recent floods will be looked at as part of the Section 19 consultation, investigation I've just mentioned, to identify potential causes. That's not to say they weren't down to poor maintenance, it's to say we need to be absolutely sure that's the reason. And that is all part of that investigation.
Thank you. Next is number 9, which is Joan Richardson, who I think may need some assistance to reach the microphone. Okay, Ms. Richardson, we're ready to go.
In view of the recent flooding in Braunston Road and Knoll Avenue, on 3 occasions recently, when the fire people had to come out, what is the council doing to rectify this?
Thank you. Councillor Wise.
This is coming from the Bellway site.
Okay, Councillor Wise.
This is going to sound like another repetitive answer. Knoll Avenue and Vaughan Road and the flooding which people in that area believe is coming from the Bellway development will be part of the Section 19 investigation. We have to look at the entire circumstances surrounding.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
We have to look at it as part of the Section 19 investigation. We have identified resource to put into that. It will take time, but to do anything, answer anything else tonight would be to do a knee-jerk reaction.
Do you have a supplementary question, Richardson?
So what action is the council going to take on this occasion to prevent any more flooding?
So I think Councillor Wise might have already answered, but do you want to just reiterate, Councillor Wise?
It's very important that we understand why the flooding is happening, aside from the fact rain has fallen from the sky. So the Section 19 investigation will look at the reasons why, and then we can look at how best to mitigate future flooding. It's not going to happen next week.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Richardson.
That flooding is
So, thank you, Ms. Richardson. We're moving on to the next question, which is number 10, which is from Jeremy Fenn. Is Mr. Fenn here? Okay. The next one is number 11, Hilary Lewis. So Ms. Lewis, this is again a question. So after you've given your question and Councillor Wise has answered, you then have one supplementary question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So I live on Melton Road, Lanham. Melton Road Lanham's flooded twice between October and January. In Storm Babet, 4 properties were flooded to the extent that 2 homes were evacuated. I returned to my home only 2 days before Christmas. My neighbour is still out of hers. The water came up to the walls of the houses again in January. A large part of the problem is caused by the road being kept open and...
Ms. Lewis, you meant to read out your question, not
Sorry.
just... carry on. You're not
Well, I
really
supplemented that just about water. The water reached laws of the properties again in Storm Henk, and I'd like to know what is the council's contingency plan for this area.
Thank you. Wise.
Internal flooding was recorded during Storm Babet at Milton Road. The circumstances of the recent floods will be looked at as part of, surprise, surprise, the Section 19 investigation to identify the possible causes. It's important to understand that the Section 19 investigation will inform the development of the new flood risk management strategy for the county.
Have a supplementary.
Yes, go ahead.
So the traffic is a large part of the problem. So the traffic going through in flooded water, causing waves of water into our homes. In other words, heavy lorries going past. Obviously our homes could have been prevented possibly from flooding if the traffic was being diverted. That took a long, long time. And
So your question is?
Yeah, okay, so the question is, can you do something about the situation on the road when flooding happens on Melton Road, please?
Councillor Wise.
I think that has to form part of the investigation. I think it's very important that that is fed back, and I think that's an important part to come forward from today. There are some things people have raised today, certain details that will all help in that investigation. And it may well be that going forward, the strategy says, for example, I'm not making any promises, that the traffic has to be stopped at this level in Langham. That would be an example of an outcome.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lewis. Number 12 is Barbara Meary on behalf of Tom Meary, takes over the parish meeting.
Mr. Chair, councillors, Tixover Village has 11 of its homes on the bankside of the River Rutland. We have been concerned over recent years, and especially concerned since Storm Henk. We have experienced a greater degree of erosion of the riverbank, and that the properties will be more affected in coming years. High groundwater levels throughout the area have also resulted in many springs evolving across farmland and village properties, causing damage to gardens and, in our case, storage room. This is thought to be exacerbated by the rainwater from the A47 being allowed to run into the village as there is no or poor drainage on it. What therefore are Rutland County Council doing or will be doing in the future in their lead as lead local flood authority role as coordinator of relevant agencies or otherwise to support management of flood and the support of those affected? Thank you.
Ms. Meary. Councillor Wise.
The circumstance of the recent floods will be looked at as part of the Section 19 investigation. The question of the high water table due to unprecedented rainfall and rising rivers and surface water runoff is a consequence of climate change and more frequent rain events, and I think highlights why we need this investigation and the new flood risk management strategy. And I think at this point it is potentially worth mentioning that we have, as administration, found the resource to employ a flood officer that will lead this into the risk strategy into the future.
Do you have a supplementary, Ms. Meary?
May I ask if you would implement Gordon Brown's suggestion that we have the area mapped in terms of effectiveness of the drainage system of Tixover? Thank you.
Do you want to answer that, Councillor White?
Sorry, the effectiveness of the drainage system would form part of that investigation. And clearly, you mentioned the issues of the River Welland, we would be linking with the Environment Agency who have responsibilities for the rivers.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Meary. Next is Peter Gatherall on behalf of Virginia and Andrew Kilpatrick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I would like to ask, is there a connection between the greater frequency and more extreme nature of flooding of the Brook in recent years and the wing treatment plant discharges? And
Okay, thank you.
Elaborate on that.
Councillor Wise.
Thank you. I mean, actually, my notes, I've put there may well be, but the investigation will have to look at that. You suggested it's a possibility. We will have to look at that as part of section 19 investigation.
I don't have a problem with putting extra surface water into the Moorcock Brook.
Is this a question, Mr. Gazzell?
The question is that, well, the brook is not fit for purpose.
So the question is?
Do something about it.
When are you going to do something about it?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Wise, presumably your answer is the same. Okay. Do you have any? You've only had one supplementary. So that was your supplementary, I'm afraid. So that is the end of your period, Mr. Gazzell. Next is Greg Harden from Stretton Parish Council. So, Mr. Harper is not here?
Yeah, he is.
Oh, is he? Yes, well, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The floods on the B668/A1 roundabouts were serious in that several cars became stranded, and only the action of volunteers to move the cars out of the flood kept the traffic moving. Emergency services did not attend. Both roundabouts have several drains, however the floods appear to have been exacerbated by several of them being completely or partially blocked by runoff areas and ditches not being cleared as silts of debris. It is therefore likely that the flooding in these crucial roundabouts linking the Rutland to the motorway network could have been prevented by a programme of drain and ditch clearance in the autumn leaf fall. The flood at the east end of Stretton Village, lower end of Manor Road, also made the road impassable for smaller vehicles and completely covered the sewage pumping station to a depth of at least 10 centimetres. Both drains in that area were also completely blocked. Approximately 60 metres of the Stockham Road was also flooded to 75 metres deep. Two drains on this stretch of road were completely filled with gravel and silt. In all, 8 block drains, 2 sections of the roadside ditch contributed to flooding of the 2 roundabouts. The question I have is not so much about the ditches, but about the, if I can find it. We're concerned that the volunteers that went into this flood water, had they become injured, what would be our culpability, what would be our liability for them? And we've not provided a minimum level equipment. Is it acceptable for local people to remove cars from the flooded areas, i.e. the roundabouts, in order to keep the traffic moving without a risk assessment having been carried out?
Thank you, Mr. Harper. Councillor Wise.
I'd like to concentrate on the last part of your question, if I may, because the other bit is going to be, we'll look at that as part of section 19. The advice is not to walk or drive through floodwaters as it is not safe. 30 centimetres of fast flowing water can knock an adult over and can hide obstacles under the water surface. 2 feet of water will float a car. Fire service responds to flooding, but there are only 3 water rescue assets for the whole of Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland. And only these can enter flood waters as fire crews are not equipped or trained to rescue from flood waters. Local people and volunteers should not enter flood water to remove cars until water has receded to safe levels.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr.
Well, this would obviously, of course, back up onto the A1 would cause a serious incident. What is the correct procedure? What should we have expected the emergency services to attend?
When the Rutland wasn't the only area within the area having flooding, there was a lot of flooding in Leicestershire. At times like that, the emergency services have to effectively triage where they think they need to be, where is most important.
And in almost all cases, they put person safety above. So if they are using those water assets to rescue people from a flooding situation, they will put that ahead of moving a car. I presume that once they had worked down the list, they would have got round to Stratton.
Thank you, Mr. Harker. Next is Mr. Simon Jackson.
Good evening, Council, Mr. Chairman. Simon Jackson, Parish, Whitwell Village. During our 23 years of residency, we've been accustomed to dealing with significant water runoff that has previously been controlled by water passing through a culvert at the rear of our property. However, there have been a number of incidents, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years, where the storm drain located at the pavement at the end of our drive has been unable to cope with the through flow, resulting in the flooding of the 606, the A606. One of the more severe floodings took place in October 2023, to which Highways Anglian Water attended. With the recent severe flooding, where serious damage could have been prevented or avoided or significantly mitigated had the various storm drains on the A606 been maintained correctly. It was only through the intervention of myself and fellow neighbour that we cleared numerous block drains to allow the floodwater to drain away, thus preventing further damage and allowing the reopening of the A606, which, as a strategic A road, RCC seemed uninterested and incapable of opening. Whilst we need to address the core issues of which we can identify and evidence, I would like to ask the following supplementary questions. What is RCC's Drain and Sewer Maintenance Programme for Whitwell? When was the last time the drains were cleaned and inspected, and who undertook this work? If so, was this work audited, and what checks are in place to ensure the work has been done to a standard?
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Councillor Wise.
Ray, it's not section 19 investigation. I've got a fairly detailed response for you. The drains on the A606 received their annual cleanse on the 5th and 6th of October 2023. Whilst not all gullies could be accessed on the first visit, 2 return visits were made to carry out cleansing required. Gullies were cleaned, but we did not require jetting. This will be another area, sorry, there is a section, so 19 here. Whether that was the appropriate decision will be part of the section 19 investigation. The council contractor used the Carbon-Tex system to measure silt levels in the gully, and this is then checked by Tarmac. Rutland County Council carries out a sample quality assurance of the programme, so Tarmac have no idea which ones we're going to go around and check. In 2023, Whitwell had routine street cleansing undertaken on the 25th of January, the 12th of May and the 18th of October, and the last of these will have picked up leaf fall. Street cleansing attended on the 4th of January to clean the roads so it could be opened and continue to visit to remove further deposits as it became possible to do so, for example on footpaths. During a flood, debris and leaves are washed downstream and can cause the drain grid to become blocked. This does not mean that the gully is silted up or blocked. When a gully or a manhole is under floodwater, manhole covers can become dislodged. Advice from the Environment Agency and emergency services is not to enter into floodwater. The council would not instruct a member of staff or a contractor to enter floodwater to clear a drain unless there was a danger to life. Then it would be the emergency services who are trained and equipped to do so. Instead, the Highways Authority would close the road to keep highway users safe until the water recedes over time. Once the water level is at a safe level, clean-up and gully cleansing can take place.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Jackson? Very much, got less than a minute.
Yes, if you don't remove a plug from the bath, the water won't recede. So are you saying that nobody is able to clear the drains, but as villagers we have to have pig excrement and other dangerous fluids on our property and surrounding lands.
Councillor Wise?
The answer as it's supplied would suggest that over time the flood water would reduce, and at that point the workers could enter to clear the remainder of the debris from the drain.
So are you saying?
Sorry, that's the end of your questions there, Mr. Jackson. Number 16 is Sinclair Rogers from Ketton Parish Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ketton has increasing incidents of flooding. In the floods earlier this month, both the River Chater and the River Welland were closed, and they closed Station Road and the Collie Western Road. Can we be reassured that these two rivers are properly maintained and that water maintenance schemes downstream from Ketton do not contribute to flooding in Ketton?
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Wise?
One of the advantages of having a Section 719 investigation is that we can ask the Environment Agency to be involved in it. It's the Environment Agency that has responsibility for rivers, and so we can call them into question as to whether they are looking after those appropriately, and we can look at what action we can take to mitigate things going forward for Kent.
Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Suddenly, the waters from the Chater over the floodplains disappeared overnight. That seems to us to be a question. Was there some change in the water maintenance programme below Ketton?
Councillor Wise?
I'm afraid I don't have an answer to that, but hopefully when we get the chance to ask the Environment Agency, you've just given us question number 1.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. Next is Mr. Andrew.
Good evening. I'm Andrew, Ketton Parish Council. In the draft strategic flood risk assessment dated the 2023, Section 4 stakeholders of the consultants of strategic flood risk assessments make no reference to the consultations which those whose homes or businesses have actually been flooded. Why have such people not been consulted? Very little data collected, and why have the local parish councils not had the opportunity to contribute to their local knowledge of flooding?
Thank you, Mr. Andrew.
Do I get a supplement?
You will at this time. Councillor Wise.
The strategic flood risk assessment you referred to was at level 1, which means it's a desktop review and includes engagement only with other statutory risk management authorities. As that moves forward and the next stage of the local plan, and we develop the new flood risk management strategy for Rutland, that will include engagement with a wide range of stakeholders and public consultation on the draft strategy.
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Andrew?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that for my sins, I only actually own a mile of the River Welland. And I can tell you, if I touch the River Welland, I should be in prison.
Is there a question there?
And the question is that the lack of knowledge of this council regard to the looking after floodplains, looking after rivers, is probably negligible. You really don't understand.
Well, where's the question? That isn't a question, that's a statement.
Well, it's a statement. You're going to have it whichever
Well,
way.
you're not allowed to have a statement. You can only have a
The
question.
fact of the matter is that unfortunately the statement.
I've cut you off, Mr. Andrew, so I'm afraid you'll have to go back to your seat.
Well, I know, Mr. Brown. I'll see you outside.
Next is Simon Kirby. Do we have Mr. Kirby here? Clearly not. Next one is Karen Tassel.
my question relates to the flooding of the land at Nook Farm, Empingham, and the historic Saxon settlement of Hall Close, Empingham, adjacent to the River Wash. And the question is, can additional measures be constructed to ensure the water piped onto the land by highways, groundwater, and water from the surrounding landowners reach the River Wash rather than causing flooding and damage on the land of Nook Farm and the historic Saxon settlement of Hall Close, Empingham? The current 2 pipes are not sufficient to take the amount of water being generated from these sources.
Thank you, Councillor Wise.
If those 2 pipes are not sufficient, that will show up in the investigation, section 19 investigation.
Do you have a supplementary?
So will the council and the highways work with Anglia Water and the Environmental Agency to alleviate the flooding and getting the water into the River Wash?
Councillor Wise.
Both of those other authorities are required to work with us on a section 19 investigation. So if the outcome is that they have work to do, they have work to do.
Thank you, Mr. Astral. Next is Nigel Spencer, which is a deputation, so we have 5 minutes for the deputation and 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can I just give a quick background? I was one of the responders from the 4x4 response that was at the floods at Mountain Bridge, trying to keep the highways closed. We got the highway closure on pretty quickly. As soon as we realised we had a developing situation, I put us onto, the whole group went onto alert, and we alerted resilience that we were in a serious situation. So I was down there for most of the time.
Okay, you're eating into your 5 minutes, Mr. Spencer.
Yeah, sorry. So in regards to the recent 6003 flooding and the consequent closure, not to mention the many thousands of pounds worth of wrecked vehicles, including a Tesco delivery van and a refuse collection lorry, how was this not foreseen? It's flooded there before at the bridge since Rutland Water was built. I remember it before that, and we never used to get a problem, but we do now. Also, the drainage system is so poor that even after the river had dropped, and I observed this myself, the river was below the road level, the water was still there. There was an ideal opportunity to work with Network Rail when the bridge over the road was demolished and a newer bridge, which is much higher, was installed. Possibly raising the road surface by a foot at the same time, but also updating or uprating the drainage to ensure that the road quickly clears after the river tops the banks. Nothing was done. The road wasn't even resurfaced or white lined, and as you know, was bent with history of many fatalities at that point, despite tons of heavy equipment and the new bridge transporter going over that road surface. The drains were left blocked. A week or so after the bridge reopened, I was actually there when it flooded, and we had to get another closure back onto the road. And that was in the summer. It's not acceptable, and it was compounded by the drivers obviously ignoring the road signs, so we were working with tarmac trying to keep getting the signs back up, because every time vehicles were going back in there, we were getting more and more vehicles stranded in there. So that, my question is...
Well, you don't have a question, this is deputation, Mr. Spencer, isn't it? Question.
Sorry.
So, have you finished your deputation?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now we've got 5 minutes for questions from members. Members, questions for Mr. Spencer. So, yes, Vice Chair. Not a question. Right. In that case, we have no questions from members, so thank you very much, Mr. Spencer. Next is David Shawns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's David Hylands. Sorry, it's a regular problem. I'm a resident of Leicester Road in Uppingham, and just to paraphrase my question, there's ditches outside of Uppingham Sports Centre, and the constables have told residents of the Uppingham School they're about 5 foot deep when they're full of water. They overflow. There's a siphon at the bottom of said ditch which flows out to places unknown. We don't really know where that goes to. They overflowed, and the water then went down into Uppingham Town. I believe it flooded the Exeter Arms and other things. The question is, because we've reported this before, the question is that what seems to be the issue is that the new developments further up Leicester Road, the Elms development that was developed 4 or 5 years ago, we've now got another one going on, which is the Avant development on the Deacons. There seems to be some sort of issue where a lot of the water coming down the road is filling this ditch, overflowing. What I want to know, having lived there for 20 years now and not seen this before, is what measures the council are going to be taking to alleviate this flooding. Will regular maintenance of the ditch and this siphon and drainage pipe be scheduled?
Thank you, Mr. Hines. Councillor Wise.
I know exactly of the ditch you're talking about, and I couldn't believe the level of water in. And I agree with you, it was unique. I've never seen anything like it in the time, and I've lived in Uppingham for 46 years. It's impossible at this stage to say whether that was just the amount of water or whether that's been exacerbated by the new estates. Very easy to blame it on the new estates. So I think it's important that that is put into the Section 19 investigation to make sure whether it actually is. And if it is, what do we do about it?
Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Hines?
I think speaking to locals who lived in Uppingham as long as perhaps you have, Christine, the field that the Elms was built upon was notoriously soggy and did it as a sponge. It was left fallow for many years before that development. The ditch between Elms.
Is this a question, Mr. Hines?
It's a statement, sorry.
Well, I'm afraid you need to ask a question, that's the rule.
So it's plainly obvious that the ditches and the hedges between the two developments, there is an added water feature that I'm sure the new residents probably didn't expect to have.
So the question is, are the ditches adequate?
Where's that water going to? Essentially, it is definitely coming off those developments.
Okay, I don't think that necessarily wants an answer from Councillor Wise. So, Secretary, Mr. Hines, that concludes item 5. Item 6, questions from members of the council. 1 question has been received from a member this evening, Councillor Heckles. Can you please put your question to Councillor Wise?
First of all, can I just offer my sympathies to everyone who's experienced difficulties with flooding? Councillor Wise, what is the, I think you've already answered this question, but I'm just going to ask again anyway. What is the procedure that council follow when flooding is reported? Are they able to help prevent the water flooding, or can they only take action once the water has subsided? Is this an action that the emergency services are committed to help with? Please can you just explain the flood process so that the residents can understand what to expect?
Councillor Heckles, Councillor Wise.
I've lost track from the beginning of the question there. Can we only enact when the flooding has subsided? We cannot ask workers to go into rising flood water. We cannot expect emergency services to go into rising flood water, except the emergency services may decide to if there's a risk to life. And I think we've all seen on television in severe floods, the fire service going across in their life rafts to rescue people from their houses. Once a flooding incident has started, at that point, all the council can do is react to what happens. We cannot halt the flooding incident. What we can do is post hoc, look at what happened, look at whether there are things that could have that been done to have reduced the impact of that in the first place. And I think we're coming into exceptional times. The last question about flooding in Uppingham. I have never seen flooding like that in Uppingham. That for me was completely unique and really highlighted to me how we're entering into new times. We are going to have to envisage things and do things that we haven't thought of before, because these floods that have happened, as somebody said, once every 40 years, are going to come to us, I think, more often.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Councillor Eccles, do you have a supplementary?
You mentioned the section 19.
Stand, please.
Each village obviously is different. Would it be good, I understand we're having the section 19, would it be good if we had a sort of flood mitigation plan for each village?
Councillor Wise?
I think at this stage it would be very dangerous, and I'd probably get stoned from either side if I said yes. I think most villages have in their head who their vulnerable residents are. They know who they head towards. I suspect most villages already have an informal emergency plan. Whether as a county we move forward to having an emergency plan absolutely for every village, I think is something we need to consider at a later date. It's not for me to decide policy on the book tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wise. Item 7, flooding in Rutland. So before we begin, I'd like to remind members that this is the item for which we've been summoned and is the focus of our debate tonight. And this is still a council meeting subject to our rules of debate, and each member may speak once as per Procedure Rule 38. And this is not able to be a question and answer session. So Councillor Stephenson, will you please introduce the item?
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I would like to thank members of the public for taking the time to speak to us this evening. I'm sure those questions and deputations will help to guide us in our debate. Thank you. I would also like to thank the Rutland County Council officers for organising this special meeting of the council. It's a busy time with budget, so I know that extra work has been put in, and thank you very much. The reason for calling this meeting is simple. Rutland experienced unprecedented flooding both in October and January, which has resulted in homes being flooded and significant disruption to our roads. It is fair to say the vast majority of residents have been impacted by the recent weather events. It is imperative, therefore, that residents could have their opportunity to share views and experiences, and that all of us as members were able to listen, and we can now debate to ensure Rutland is able to plan and deliver effective management of flooding in the future. It is also essential the executive has the opportunity to share what has been done and what they are planning to do to address flooding, whilst also offering reassurance to residents the statutory functions as the lead flood authority have been met. Data collection and reporting is one crucial aspect of this, as it is this data which is used by the Environment Agency to enable the release of funds from the flood recovery framework as announced by the government after the January floods. Rutland's residents and business eligibility, I believe, but do check me out on that, is reliant on this. You will note from my report accompanying this agenda item the sheer breadth of partners, agencies and organisations involved in effective management and prevention of flooding. We've also heard this evening how residents and parish councils play a vital role in this as well. Any future plans must demonstrate clarity in roles and responsibilities, whilst also indicating where additional investment must be made to enable action to be taken. Rutland must make sure its house is in order so that a clear, coordinated, evidence-based and articulate voice is heard by the Environment Agency and central government, both to influence policy that best meets our needs whilst ensuring appropriate funding is unlocked. It is for this reason that the recommendation before you is a simple one. Council requests the Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee to investigate the above matters, guided by Council's debate, and make recommendations to Cabinet and Council regarding the role of Council as local lead flood authority. We, as elected members, can play our part in assisting in this vital work, and so I look for support this evening And I'm of course happy to answer any questions. I know I'm not happy to answer any questions, I think Chair from what you said. No, there's a shade from the Chief Exec. No, I'm not answering any questions, but I'm looking forward to hearing the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stephenson. We have a seconder, Councillor Karen Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Could I reserve the right to speak again? Thank you. So questions and deputations from residents and their experiences.
I'm being advised that you're speaking now, so I'm afraid you can't speak. So if you'd like to just say you're going to second, and then speak during. Right. So the seconder is Councillor Payne, and then you will be able to speak during the debate. Okay, we've got a proposer and a seconder members for the for what's in front of you. So it's now open to members. Councillor Beggy and then Councillor Carr.
So could I ask for a point of clarification and reserve the right to speak?
Yeah, I'll do too. Why not?
Just going back to Councillor Wiley's comment, there was a bit of low flood warnings. Looking at the historic flood warnings, there are flood warnings on the second at Ketton for the River Chater, River Welland at Harryworth, Welland tributaries for Coley Creek, Ketton and Oakham, plus yellow and amber weather warnings from the 29th to the 12th. Which is correct? No flood warnings, or was there flood warnings?
So what, you're asking a question now?
It was a clarification. We were told there's no flood warning, but
so it's a clarification from Councillor Wise?
Yes, please.
Councillor Wise, have you got any clarification on that?
I was informed that there were no advance warning. I thought the ecological officer Storm Henk was due to just miss us.
Okay, I'm just looking at the historical flood warnings and weather warnings online. It doesn't say that.
Okay, now just open to debate. Councillor Carr.
Thank you. Whilst I welcome this proposal, and particularly the language that is used in it, especially about having a proactive approach to management of risk posed by flooding, and also having a focus on flood prevention. For me, prevention is much better than cure. The issues in Barleythorpe have started well before Storm Babet. And whilst the proposal raises some really good points, for me, it feels very heavily weighted on the cure. When things go wrong in parts of Barleythorpe, one of the biggest challenges is understanding who is accountable. To say it's complicated is an understatement. And even today, I've received an email from Highways indicating that Barleythorpe is complex. I and many others understand full well how these complexities lead to communication issues, delays, assumptions and bystander apathy. Residents reported to me that pipe was bouncing an overflow pond, which was blocked with building debris, was reported in September and October. In the early hours of the 1st and 2nd of January at 1 AM, residents were out trying to clear the drains. This was also reported to Highways, Severn Trent, Anglian Water, Prime, Alison Homes and the Environment Agency. Some residents have stated that they tried to contact Alison Homes on multiple occasions. One resident stated quite clearly to me, and I quote, "This could have been avoided if it had been treated as an urgent matter." Residents are constantly complaining about the smells that are coming through their bathrooms, which suggests the ongoing issues with the drainage at that part of Barleythorpe. At a meeting called by the Parish Council on the 8th of Jan, my fellow Barleythorpe colleague, Councillor Hans, he attended with me. It was clear that one of the biggest issues is about maintenance and accountability. A resident at this meeting stated she had spoken to someone that had been called out to clear the drains, and in his opinion, this had never been cleaned, and more investigation and drain cleaning was required. That this was something that he was going to report back on. Subsequently, homes were flooded on the 2nd of January, and I have seen photos and video footage which shows residents knee deep in water. And I appreciate what has been said about people not going in to flooded areas for safety issues. But when they're trying to save their properties, sometimes common sense doesn't prevail. I do want to take this opportunity though to thank the community safety team and the social care team for helping those that were elderly and vulnerable. We are very grateful for this support, but this was limited due to the roads not being adopted. And this is the common theme in Bargethorpe and will continue to do so until this work has been completed. And what we don't know is when this will be. Some residents have been living in the infected areas for over 14 years, and I know our MP was also trying to establish with the parish council an end date to the final road. But there is now a further proposal for 67 houses, which is only just around the corner from the affected area. And from their plans, it appears that the additional homes will share the same drainage supply. My understanding is the flood risk assessment is from 2017. And given the changes in the weather patterns, is this acceptable? So back to where I started, prevention is better than cure. So what is the role for planning? And whose responsibility is it to hold those to account when areas aren't adopted? And should there be more prevention strategies be included in the proposal rather than being reactive? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor McGraw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to give a little bit of personal context first. My first request for help as a new councillor came on the very day that I was elected. Mr. and Mrs. Martindale, who are sat here and have already spoken, sought my help with a flooding issue that had affected their properties and neighbours in Ferrers Close since 2019, 4 years before I was elected. The recent flood events are not unique, nor do they have a single cause, but they do reflect a global trend to more violent weather extremes that scientists have long predicted. Rutlanders don't stand or sink alone. We all know that from the news bulletins. I believe my fellow councillors and members of the public joining us here and online might benefit from considering the Public Accounts Committee report published yesterday. They examined government plans to improve flood resilience. I want to highlight 4 points from that report. The government has no idea whether its 6-year, £5.2 billion capital programme is making the UK more resilient to flooding. The measure used, properties better protected, doesn't count those properties that have become less well protected due to housing development and climate change and other factors. 203,000 properties in England are estimated to be at increased risk of flooding from capital underspend, delayed maintenance and Environment Agency budget cuts. That's more than the 200,000 properties that are expected to be better protected. The Environment Agency relies on local authorities like this one to help improve the country's flood resilience, particularly surface water flooding, and also ensuring that new developments don't add to the problem. Yet DEFRA are unclear about when local authorities will assume additional responsibilities for approving certain construction activities. And of course, there's a lack of funding. So nationally, we have no effective plan for flood resilience. This is not a surprise. Days earlier, Greenpeace told us, using Environmental Agency data, that thousands of bits of flood defence infrastructure in the country are so damaged they're almost useless. This includes hundreds in areas that were most battered by Storm Babet. But it's also not new. After Storm Christoph in January 2019, Unearthed found a similar picture. Thousands of pieces of flood defences almost useless. This is set to become worse in coming years if nothing effective is done. Now, we welcome that our MP is now also giving her attention to this problem, but residents might be forgiven for wondering, as she has been a member of the governing party in Parliament since 2019, where she has been for the last 4 years. So, the severity of recent incidents undoubtedly warrants serious review, but not in the form of the motion presented at this meeting. There is a statutory framework. Councillor Wise has already mentioned it, perhaps 24 times. Section 19 investigation under the Flood and Water Management Act 2010. This states briefly that a lead local flood authority must, on becoming aware of a flood, investigate to the extent that it considers necessary or appropriate, and we know the answer here, which risk management authorities have relevant functions, whether those authorities have exercised or proposed to exercise those functions, and then afterwards it must publish and disseminate the findings. All this should be carried out against formal flood investigation criteria, but the legislation doesn't define those. That's up to RCC. Ultimately, it's for Council to decide what role the Scrutiny Committee might perform to support those statutory investigations.
Councillor Rob, you'll come into your 5 minutes. Can you conclude?
Regardless of that, we expect that any review should be conducted following the principles established by the PIP review after the 2007 floods. Thank you.
Councillor Rob. For the councillors. Councillor Hempstead.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd just like to ask, can I make a comment on behalf of a fellow councillor who was unable to attend the meeting tonight?
You may.
Thank you very much. They're very brief. I will not eat into all my time. I've just been asked regarding Whissendine, representing Rosemary Powell, that obviously there was a flooding problem and it went down through the high street, and it's already been mentioned, and the pub got flooded. It's just the awareness for this space that there are floods that have been unseen in many, many years, and referring back to 40 years ago when we had a flood previously of this nature in Langham. But also make sure that we're aware that it's not just Anglian Water, it's also Severn and Trent, and therefore we need to be working with both these parties. And you know, if we do take the decision to support the motion tonight, that actually we do it through a proper process and we don't put it off to a task and finish group would be asked for. If I may now start on mine. Thank you very much. So parts of Langham were flooded in the flood area, and clearly events are a combination of saturated ground, time of year, and regarding also the land and minimal crops, reduced ploughing maybe and direct drilling. But we had downpours in the past, and some are talking of 40 years ago that this had happened. They coincide with the variance in climate that will occur again in 40 years, but there is a risk it will occur more frequently. And there is an impact on this having on the land. Drainage of hard surfaces is greater. Drainage of hard surfaces is greater than drainage of earth or permeable surfaces. Do we take enough account of the compound impact that we will be causing by our approach to planning for surface water? We have clearly had failures in our drainage systems, some due to root ingress, some due to collapsed drains, but when a community reports faults on a regular basis, yet we take no action or minimal action, such as a cursory inspection, are we adding to the compound impact and in the long term creating a larger cost for getting the system back up and working, and repairing the damage also caused by the excess water flowing freely down the roads, which is causing the erosion of the edges of the roads, which will mean bigger costs for repairing. So I accept that we cannot mitigate against extreme weather, but we should be able to do the basics to reduce additional risk. So my question is, are we really understanding our network, and do we have an up-to-date map of the services And secondly, do we really understand what maintenance should be carried out to ensure that drainage service systems work? And finally, are they meeting our SA agreements? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemsley. Other councillors? Councillor Karen Payne.
Thank you, Chair. The questions and deputations from residents and their experiences comes from parish councils and the parish forum last night, and the debate this evening will demonstrate a need for us to engage with our communities to work together to tackle the challenge of flooding in Rutland. We need to accept the fact that times have changed, flooding will happen more frequently, and in places it's never happened before. We need to engage our communities in designing a solution to a common challenge. Householders, landowners, town and parish councils, emergency services, the Environment Agency, the water boards, all have a role to play. We need to establish a firm evidence base, be clear about who's responsible for what, how we work together positively, and the governance and communication that underpins it to make it effective. Definition of our strategy and lower level plan to manage flood events should take input from the public, interested agencies and third parties to consider preventative maintenance, management of flooding itself, and how we gather data to assess impacts and inform lessons learned, building an iterative process. Information and requests from residents heard tonight and from future consultation events should be translated into positive action under the auspices of the Scrutiny Committee immediately before we are subject to another climate change event. And I urge all councillors to support the motion tonight. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Payne. Other members? Yes, Councillor West.
Thank you, Chairman. It's easy, members, for me to be smug here, representing, as I do, Cottesmore, Market Overton and Malrow, sitting on the top of the hill. But Market Overton has had flooding in the past and has demonstrated that our procedures do work. We have had significant flooding opposite the village shop in Market Overton due to several blocked drains which were severely silted. The survey was carried out by Rutland County Council, established that the drains were silted. We sent out a drain jetter, which couldn't clear the drains. They were too heavily silted. Came back to RCC. We realised we needed a bigger jetter, so we sent out a much bigger jetter. The drains were successfully cleared. Flooding hasn't happened there since, that's 2.5 years ago. That element of our system works. We've heard a lot tonight about how we've got a lot of blocked drains. RCC does clear drains, and that's regardless of who's in administration here. RCC has always run a programme of clearing drains, clearing gullies, clearing grates and ditches, and I think, I'd like to say and stick my neck out, but we have always cleared ditches where they are our responsibility. But what we can't do as an authority is clear away leaves and twigs where they sit on top of drain covers, where rainfall brings them down. What I have seen is members of the community clearing drains themselves, and it just goes to show that as councillors here, we do have a role in helping to galvanise and organise and encourage people to help look after their own communities as well. We've heard examples of people helping to clear their own flood remediation systems, and I salute everyone that takes part in that. Alderman Baines will know an awful lot about the Welland Rivers Trust, which I think is now called the East Mercia Rivers Trust. I think it's just been renamed. They recently held a Volunteers' Day to clear and improve the gouache confluence with the Welland, which does show the value of community input into helping to maintain their own areas. So I'd just like to say that does happen. It's not RCC that organises that and makes that. It's the communities themselves. It's everybody that makes that sort of thing happen, and it does happen. But downpours like we had on the 2nd of January are, not quite unprecedented, but very difficult to manage. And know, as landowners, as a landowner myself, I can't manage the flood water that comes off my own fields and into the rivers. It took some of my crops with it. I don't have an accurate and up-to-date drainage map of my own farm, and I suspect other farmers here will probably admit the same. They might know where some of their drains are, but perhaps not all of them. So, for the authority as a whole to implement, and I think it's a wonderful idea from Mr. Brown, he's left, to implement an asset strategy to map our drainage system of the county is a wonderful idea, but it would have to start with land drains leading into ditches, leading into rivers. And I don't know where mine are, and I'm just one of many landowners in Rutland, so it would be an enormous undertaking. It would be wonderful if we could do it, and I think it might be something that we'd all have to contribute to together. I'd be happy to provide what maps I've got, and I'm sure other landowners would as well, but it would be, you know, an enormous undertaking. It's very easy for members of the public, such as Mr. Brown, to come here and say, well, we need to do this, but the scale of that task is absolutely enormous.
Thank you, Councillor West. Other members, Councillor Wilby.
Chair. First of all, can I commend Councillor Wise on her resilience and her answer today, because most of it has sat on your shoulders at a difficult time, and you've done a tremendous job in doing that. I think the problem that we all can see very evidently is that we are in trouble at the moment, be it from climate change or lack of investment in infrastructure. We are creaking at the seams, and it will require an awful lot of work from an awful lot of people to try and work together using, as Councillor West has just said, you know, resources in the community, all those sort of things. But we can't just duck it. We have to work together to try and make sure that we get the right answers. And all I would like to say to Councillor Wise, when you're doing your 19 plan, will you please extrapolate the Mr. Brown's, not Councillor Brown, Mr. Brown's knowledge that the eastern part of the county, where I'm responsible for in my wards, requires, you know, constant attention now. My flood warning, a flood warden who'd been there for some 27 years, has never seen the Gwash quite so up as it was. We were in an gnats of it going over and causing absolute mayhem. Further, the Glen River has always been causing problems in Essendine. With the there are now a couple of industrial areas in there. There's also a vineyard. I know that the farmer had to move his cattle to a different property completely, well outside the normal things. There's a lot of things that need looking at, and if the solar farm comes to pass, then that is one other additional runoff area to worry about. So I'm glad you've got the portfolio there.
Thank you, Councillor Wilby. Other members, Councillor Corby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And with Councillor Wilby just making his comments there, I've got to add about the east side of Rutland. As you all know, David just mentioned the solar farm. That's rather long, many photographs here of flooding, not within Rutland, but downstream in Gretford particularly. It was completely flooded out. And I just also needed to put across the point to council that 530,000 glass panels, the run off to that, I think we might be needing a dam to protect Gretford. So, just to add to those comments, I'd like to ask if we can, for portfolio of the planning, if we can put together what I have now from the Mallard Action Pass Group, Mallard Action Group, to put forward to the Secretary of State or to the MP, because obviously the actual evidence is closed now, but we really need to put forward this. This has happened since the examination, but further indicated circumstances unlikely to be able to put that forward.
So we are debating the motion in front of us, councillor Corby, rather than the solar panels.
I accept that, Chair, but the solar panels are massively part of it.
Agreed. Thank you. Let's not forget about the deep south of Rutland, which I represent. We had our fair share of flooding as well. A third of my farm was underwater for a few days earlier on in the month. Any other members? I'll come to you shortly, Councillor Beggy, because you have had a full go already. Any other members? Councillor Paul Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Listening to you tonight, it's quite clear that causation is different in different areas. And clearly, there have been many good ideas put forward and individual suggestions which can be looked at. The only really way of sorting this is in the Section 19 inquiries, when each one of those aspects can be looked at. And I trust and hope that we can get this moving as soon as possible. I suspect that there is going to be quite a competition to getting people who are capable of doing this, because there are so many areas that have been affected. But all we can do is try our best. I would like to underline one aspect that we have done. Following Babet, we should be waiting for from the LLRC the precise reasons and information. But we weren't getting it, we still haven't got it. But we decided, in view of the recognition of the potential problems from climate change, that we would nevertheless go ahead and contain in our draft budget the roles of both the flood officer and a climate change officer. Both these roles were regrettably informed by a former administration, but I'm quite sure they agree with me that on this occasion, although it's going to be the beneficial way of going forward, and hopefully if we have this matter going towards
Councillor Brown, can I just stop you there? Councillor Stephenson has a point of information here.
Yes, I do. It might be a point of order, and I will go under your direction. Councillor Brown used the word axe, which I believe is an inaccurate representation of the budget last year, which those positions were held. Certainly the climate change officer, they were held as we, as a council, prioritise living within our means and delivering on financial strategy. So I feel axe is an inappropriate word to use. Is that order or information?
It is certainly one of the two.
Thank you.
It's a point of information, I believe. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Paul Brown.
Thank you.
Sorry, hang on a minute, Councillor Brown.
Sorry, just
Vice Chairman has a
just
point.
a point of clarity, which everyone in the room might help. LLRC was mentioned, perhaps.
Leicestershire, Leicester City Resilience Forum. Yeah. It's the one that deals with all the emergencies within the area. The three areas get together, and this is the one where Councillor Wise described there is only 3 emergency fire brigade water pumping stations.
Okay, you'd like to carry on, Councillor Brown?
Yes. So I'm really pleased that we have put these back in again. I'm hoping that if we can fill these roles as soon as possible, that it will be an aid and adjunct to scrutiny's decisions and to help the situation as soon as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Other members? Oh, sorry. Okay, Councillor Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to first take the opportunity to thank the emergency services, our officers and the residents that worked together for protracted periods during the recent events to help prevent residents and property and prevent the situation being worse. Specific mentions through Councillor Carr to our community in Barleythorpe, who I know through the night had worked tirelessly, and also the comment I was going to add to Mr Spencer's question, and to thank him and the team at the 4x4s, who are always out at this time of year throughout Rutland, pulling us up hills and things, and this time it was flood, so I would like to thank those members particularly. The amount of rainfall on both days, both during Babet and recent Henk, was always going to cause immediate issues. Indeed, 10% of our annual rainfall fell on the 2nd of January in Rutland. However, the ongoing disruption to our residents' lives from road closures and standing water needs to be reflected on. Our role as councillors within the aftermath is to reflect on policies and decisions taken historically around this table and review them through the lens of a changing climate and austerity. My fellow members have been detailing issues in their wards, and I'll focus more on mine. As we know, the geographical position of Rutland has not changed over the years, but the frequency of flooding has. Therefore, we need to investigate what has happened, or maybe what has not happened, which has led to the increase in flooding incidents. I've received multiple calls and emails from residents during and after the recent floods. Indeed, we've heard more tonight, who have traced the floodwater directly to blocked highway grates, blocked culverts and poorly maintained drainage ditches. Heavy rainfall will always have poured from the hills onto the fields and roads near to properties, but it seems now the drainage systems are struggling to cope. Virtually every email I received referred to a drainage maintenance issue. Let me be clear, I'm not suggesting for one moment that all of these drainage issues were the fault of the council, because clearly they were not. However, the council is the lead local flood authority and the lead emergency planning authority, so it is incumbent upon us, more than anyone, to identify where and why problems occurred and who was responsible in each case. Where the fault was not ours, we should still do everything possible to ensure that whichever agency or landowner was responsible takes appropriate action. Whether a drainage problem is this council's responsibility or not, we are here to protect our residents, our taxpayers. We need to monitor all types of flood risk on an ongoing basis and act to address potential problems, even if that means pressuring other organisations and landowners to fulfil their responsibilities. I believe any member-led investigation be timely, quick to report, and will not interfere with any operational investigations into the response led by corporate management, i.e. anything that our scrutiny looks at won't interfere with the section 19 and will actually add on to that, because we may, as members, decide that policies need to change that will be slightly different to what happens from the section 19. We have a slightly different lens that we can look through. I believe we also need to look forward, as we know these extreme weather incidents are predicted to become more frequent. This will affect decisions on climate change, planning, street cleaning, highways, and all our budgets. And that's where we need to focus our council efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Go to Councillor Smith and then Councillor Beggy.
As we have heard, the flooding in Rutland was extensive and it occurred rapidly. And I just want to emphasise some of the points that have been made about the officer's response. I sometimes feel that in hearing that the officers are being criticised for lack of action. I think that's far from the truth. As I say, it came on rapidly, and the officers responded rapidly. They called a meeting early that day in response to reports of flooding coming in. They decided to support the residents most at risk. They gave out road closure information on our website and in social media. There were multiple updates on road closures. The last update was at 10:30, which shows that they were working beyond the time they were supposed to. There was a good highway response. Remember, they had to go out during the bad weather. They did close the road, they put up the floodboards. the most significant flooding, as been pointed out, was in Osler's Drive, which I gather is unadopted. And it resulted in a number of properties being flooded and residents having to relocate. Rutland County Council's community safety team went out and was supporting on site the residents that were flooded. So, it's already mentioned that we've had a compliment today of our safety officer who went out and has gone out in subsequent days to help those residents who were flooded. And I think the council should recognise the significant response of officers on that night and subsequent days. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Smith, Councillor Beggy, I'll take your first little speech as a point of information, so if you'd like to carry on.
Very kind. It was a point of information, so well spotted, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, it's sad that this is sort of degraded into political missile throwing. And them versus us, this is not really the forum for that. We're here to try and make a difference to residents. I have 2 points really. The first is that we mentioned about community and the communities to be able to respond to these, particularly in my parish, which I'll come on to talk about, they need resources to do that. So the first thing with any Section 19 or task and finish group, if that is what happens, we do need a residents up approach as much as an agency down approach, putting our residents first. From a micro level, the feeling from my parish is the help and support during this period from the local authority was limited. I know for a fact that Greetham and Stretton got very little support, and I was on the phone and social media trying to find sandbags as the water lapped up against the doors in the frozen north of the county. It was only from a call from help from the community and the spirit of my ward, the situation was not a lot worse. So I believe RCC should now look as part of the Section 19 and task to review the response plan as far as residents are concerned and look to better equip parishes to deal with these situations. I take Stretton, for example, which has got a very detailed emergency plan to deal with snow and incidents on the A1, but certainly not flooding. And their community spirit with the right equipment or sandbags, they could have solved a lot of potential issues. So my first point is that any review, please residents up as well as agency down. My second is a request to the portfolio holder for planning. As my role as chair of planning, we have a lot of applications which go through the statutory consultations of the local flood authority, which is Rutland County Council, as well as the likes of Anglian Water and Severn Trent. A lot of the decisions and applications that are approved based on these, we are told we should not send to appeal because they would get overturned. This is despite many deputations from residents where applications were put forward, so example Braunston Road, Whistledown, Greetham and Stretton, who have highlighted issues with flooding, which now come to pass. Some are due to runoff, some down to streams, some due to drainage capacity. What I would like the portfolio of planning to do, and potentially with my help and support, is to see how we can better build residents' views and evidence into the decisions that the local flood authority makes, where we have some ability to input, whereas not necessarily Anglian Water and Severn Trent, we certainly can hopefully influence that, or at least look at how that can be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beggy. Other members? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Hope you don't
Yes,
mind
you
if I-
may remain
if I sit
seated.
in. Thank you.
Yeah.
Listening to the debate and reading some of the information that's been presented, it would be easier if you're a resident, I think, sitting in the residence chairs in this room and online and in the communities, to think that an administration like ours is going to be removed and isn't going to feel sympathy or empathy. And I'd just like to say that's far from the truth. You know, we're all residents of Rutland, I think in this room, around this table, and I think we all feel for our own communities. And the difference is that we have the responsibility of doing something about it. And in doing that, there is always a tendency, I think, the public expectation is that we can do things faster and more thoroughly than we actually can do. And so I think what we have to be careful is that the management of expectation doesn't become an issue where residents lose confidence and think that we're not doing anything, which isn't true. My colleague Christine here referred to Section 19 investigations multiple times, and that is the path that is open to us. Rutland County Council is a member of all the relevant forums dealing with flood and resilience management, and on the day in Storm Henk, there was a massive response. The problem is that it wasn't everywhere, and we've heard a lot of anecdotal evidence that means that we didn't get to places that people expected us to be, which is disappointing. But I'd remind people that we only have a certain resource that we can depend on and deploy. And in the regimes of cuts to council budgets over the last 20 odd years, that becomes increasingly difficult to supply. So that was really said in a way of trying to make sure people are aware that we all feel for them, and we all feel a responsibility to do something about it. In terms of this administration's priorities, we've just put out a refreshed corporate strategy, which includes climate change, and we are putting our money where our mouth is on that. And so we have, I think for the first time, said that in the next year's budget, we will have a flood officer who will be responsible for our flood management strategy. And I believe this is a first. So regardless of whether or not these posts were axed in the past or not, the real issue is that they didn't happen. So what we've done is put emphasis on that, and we have put money into making sure we have a flood officer next year. In terms of other things that we're trying to do, we've recognised the fact that some people may have been forced out of their homes, which became uninhabitable because of the floodwater. In Rutland's case, it wasn't that many homes, thank goodness, but overall, a lot of people will probably think that we will get grants and money from central government in order to deal with this situation. The truth is that the government scheme only triggers when 50 homes have been inundated sufficiently that people have to permanently move out for a while. Now, so we aren't able to claim or support people on a council tax in Rutland through central government intervention. But what we have said is that for any dwellings where there is council tax levied and where the occupiers have to come out of the home because the home is unoccupiable, then we will support a refund of council tax, which I think has been possibly not publicised in the way that we're doing, or taken up in the way that we would like people to understand. So we are trying to make sure that there is some demonstrable empathy coming from the council. I think that's probably what I've got to say.
Well, that was very well timed, because you've got about 8 seconds left. Councillor Warren.